Hello, Malvern High School students. My name is Aaron Singer. I'm a historian and teacher educator at Hofstra University. I want to thank your teacher, Ms. Reynolds, for inviting me to speak with your class about Lorraine Hansberry, her play, A Raisin in the Sun, and what they tell us about American history and society. In 2020, in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement, we need to ask ourselves, why should we still read a play from the 1950s about housing discrimination on the south side of Chicago? Part of the answer, at least for me, is that in November 2019, a Newsday investigation of Long Island real estate agents detailed evidence of widespread discrimination against potential Black and Latino homebuyers. 1 year later, in October 2020, another Newsday investigation reported that the Suffolk County Police Department stopped and searched Black and Latino drivers and their vehicles at significantly higher rates than whites. I suspect that many of you already knew this from your own family's experience, but not how systematic the local police treated the crime of driving while Black or driving while Latino. From the Newsday investigation, we learned that Suffolk County officers pulled over Black drivers at a rate almost 4 times higher than white drivers, and Latinos about twice as often as non-Hispanic whites. After stopping drivers, Suffolk County police searched Black drivers over 3 times more frequently than they did whites, and Latinos almost twice as often. We read Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun because systemic racism still plagues the United States, and the play helps us understand its impact on a very personal level. The title of the play comes from the poem Harlem by African-American Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes. It is a poem that still captures much of the emotion and power of today's Black Lives Matter movement. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Most people know Hughes as a poet, playwright, and essayist, but few realize he was a radical political activist who identified as a communist in the 1930s as part of the struggle against racism in the United States. He was also probably gay, which would have further deepened his sense of alienation from and oppression by American society. Lorraine Hansberry, who died from cancer at the age of 34 in 1965, was the first African-American woman to have a play she wrote performed on Broadway. It is not surprising that Hansberry used a line from Hughes's poem as the title of her play. They became friends while working on left-wing causes during the 1950s, and Hughes read a poem at Hansberry's funeral. Like Langston Hughes, Lorraine Hansberry was also gay and identified with the American Communist movement in the struggle against racism in the United States. As a young woman in the 1950s, while working for the African-American publication Freedom, Hansberry came into contact with and was influenced by radical left-wing Black thinkers and activists, Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois. Lorraine Hansberry was born and grew up on the south side of Chicago, the setting for A Raisin in the Sun. Her father, Carl, was a real estate broker, and her mother, Nanny Louise, was a driving school teacher. Lorraine Hansberry knew about housing segregation and racism firsthand, and her family was involved in a Supreme Court case, Hansberry v. Lee, challenging housing discrimination. A racially restrictive covenant or contract signed by white landowners, prevented African Americans from purchasing or leasing land in the Washington Park subdivision of Chicago's Woodlawn neighborhood. Lee was one of the white landholders. Hansberry was Lorraine's father. Lorraine Hansberry wrote about her experience while her parents were pursuing the legal case in her memoir, To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, which was published after her death. This is a quote. 25 years ago, my father spent a small fortune, his considerable talents, and many years of his life fighting in association with NAACP attorneys, Chicago's restrictive covenants, and one of this nation's ugliest ghettos. That fight also required our family to occupy disputed property in a hellishly hostile white neighborhood in which literally howling mobs surrounded our house. My memories of this correct way of fighting white supremacy in America include being spat at, cursed, and pummeled in the daily trek to and from school. And I also remember my desperate and courageous mother patrolling our household all night with a loaded German Luger, doggedly guarding her 4 children while my father fought the respectable part of the battle in the Washington court. The Supreme Court ultimately ruled that Lorraine Hansberry's father could challenge the racial covenant in court, but not rule on the legality of the covenant itself. A similar racially restrictive covenant prevented African Americans from purchasing or renting homes in Levittown on Long Island after World War II. The Supreme Court finally declared racially restrictive covenants an unconstitutional violation of the 14th Amendment and unenforceable in 1948 in the case of Shelley v. Kramer. Raisin the Son is about the Youngers, an African-American family that is hoping to escape from segregation and discrimination. Walter and Ruth Younger, their son, Walter's mother, and sister live in a dilapidated 2-bedroom apartment on Chicago's South Side. Walter barely makes a living driving a limousine. When the father of the family dies, they are supposed to receive a $10,000 payment on his life insurance policy. Mama, the matriarch of the family, uses some of the money as a down payment on a house in an all-white neighborhood. Her son Walter argues they should invest the rest of the money in a liquor store. The play centers around the conflict between Mama and Walter over the family's choices and future. At one point, a white man who represents the neighborhood homeowners offers them a considerable amount of money not to buy the house. Walter throws the man out, but then decides they should accept his offer. When Mama refuses to go along, a frustrated Walter declares, "I didn't make this world. It was given to me this way." Walter is frustrated with his mother's decisions, but also with the weight racism places on a black man in America. A Raisin and the Son debuted on Broadway in 1959 and won the New York Drama Critics Award as Best Play of the Year. In 1961, the original Broadway cast, featuring Claudia McNeil as Mama and Sidney Poitier as Walter, reprised their roles in a movie version. The play was revived on Broadway in 1973, 2004, and 2014, and a made-for-TV version starring Sean Combs and Felicia Rashad was broadcast in 2008. The song, To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, performed by Nina Simone and written by Simone and Weldon Irvin, was a tribute to Lorraine Hansberry after his death. It has been performed by a number of artists, including Aretha Franklin. This is Nina Simone singing.
gifted and black. Oh, what a lovely, precious dream to be young, gifted and black. Open your heart to what I mean. You shouldn't leave now. In the whole world, you know, there's a million boys and girls who are young, gifted and black.
Thank you very much for having me today.